Good morning. Can you hear me okay at the back? That's great. Agile governance. Dreaming the impossible? I don't think so. In the next half hour, I just want to explain to you how I think we can be more agile in our governance and also bring together the best of traditional planning and project management ideas with the new ideas that are coming along in lean and agile thinking. So what does agile mean to you? Agile governance. Some people think these two words can't go together. So the whole thesis of what I'm going to talk about today is how we can get agile and good project management governance to work together. So you may be asking yourselves, well, what is agile? I've heard this word. I have some idea of what it's about. I'll explain a little bit about that. But surely agile is only for web development, very small projects you may be thinking, or small, tiny projects, tiny teams working together, not serious mainstream projects. I want to show you a case study of a very big project in America done within government, which may be surprising to you that government can also be agile as well as commercial organizations. Does agile mean a loss of control over what's going on? Well, it shouldn't if it's done properly and it's disciplined. And also, can you use agile in a mission-critical project that's important for your organization rather than maybe just some web or information project? So what is agile? In 2001, some American, British, Belgians got together in Colorado and decided to sign this Agile Manifesto. They all represented different approaches towards small incremental development of computer systems, but they were very worried that during the 1990s, some very, very big methods had been developed which seemed to be forcing too much documentation, over-detailed planning, and it seemed quite a lot of failed projects. And the Agile Manifesto says that we should not focus so much on processes and tools, which I think we are prone to do as project managers, but we should think about individuals and how they work together. And we should value a working product more than just documentation. Collaborate with our suppliers and customers rather than negotiate and fight with them, and respond to change when we need to rather than just blindly following a plan. And this is the Agile Manifesto. And it was seen at the time, because it is called a manifesto, it was seen almost as a beginning of a war on traditional big planning. So these agile pirates were saying that traditional planning created a one-way waterfall of events in a project, grand designs that often failed. And in fact, there were some very big project failures in the 1990s, especially in London. The London Stock Exchange Taurus project was a spectacular failure that was based on a very big traditional waterfall methodology and a lack of flexibility in traditional planning. In response, the traditionalists were saying, well, no, this agile thing sounds like we've got lack of control, low quality of output. We've seen some of these initial agile projects, and very unclear specifications because you don't have a big specification signed off up front. And this seemed to be some sort of war that's been going on for about 10 or so years now. And I think now we're getting a bit tired of it. I am. So what I'm going to propose is that we should avoid this methods war and give peace a chance. Let's talk to each other. Let's, traditional planners, see what you can learn from the agile people. And the agile people also have a look at some of the traditional planning methodologies, especially at the program and the portfolio level. That's what I'm going to talk through today. Okay? So I think maybe some of you in the audience are program managers and you're managing portfolios. Yes? Yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. So I'm going to talk about what agile is, just so that we understand. Then I'll talk a little bit about agile portfolio management, agile program management, and assurance as well. Do we have any assurance people here? People doing project assurance work? Yeah, good. So 4 parts to the presentation. First part, what is agile? I'm going to start off with a case study. And in the early 2000s, 2001 I think it was, this guy here, Robert Hansen, was arrested. He's an FBI agent. And he was caught depositing these computer disks with top secret information underneath this bridge, and he was about to pick up $50,000 in cash from some Russian spies. And he was using this cash and diamonds that they were leaving for him as well to shower gifts upon a girlfriend that he'd met in this particular gentleman's club. This is a business case, okay? And this is a business case that's very strong because this wasn't the only failure that the FBI had. They had lots of cases where people, their agents were leaking information away from their old mainframe computer system, and they couldn't join up the information properly. The Oklahoma City bomber case was thrown into disarray because they lost 50,000 documents that they should have had in place. They needed a new case management system. So this is a case study of a waterfall failure. In fact, it's a scientific experiment in that we actually had the FBI tried twice to run their project using a traditional big design up front waterfall approach. And I'm going to say my thesis here is that if you're running an innovation project, that may be inappropriate. Okay? If you're running another type of project, maybe the waterfall planning approach is good. And in other cases, you need to mix the approaches together. So let's be sophisticated about this rather than having this war between the different sets of pirates. Yeah? Let me just run through this very quickly. I've run through this on a webinar previously that you can rewind on the APM, the UK APM website. Project number one was called the VCF system, the virtual case file system, a monolithic design, one great big design up front. From 2002 to 2005, no delivery at all, and then it was cancelled. And that was a cost of $300 million. So this is a very large project for every single FBI agent to use, Department of Homeland Security, and various police agencies and state agencies to use as well. Probably about 20 or 30,000 users, most of whom are working at secret level. And what they did was a classic piece of planning, which you would want to do if you're building a skyscraper or a tunnel or a bridge. But in this case, they were doing some very heavy innovation. I think it was inappropriate. So what they were doing was they're gathering their requirements, analyzing, designing, producing a lot of documentation, finally doing the computer programming, and then testing it right at the end. So this particular failure was looked at by the Government Accountability Office in the United States, and they said, the problem was you didn't do enough planning. The problem was you needed to do a bigger design. It needed to be more detailed. Okay, they thought, let's set up the project again, and this time we'll set up a huge project management office. That cost them $100 million, over 100 staff just working in the PMO alone, plus Lockheed Martin as a prime contractor on a fixed price project. That was another, $400 million. And they ran the project again. They called it the Sentinel project. So there's project number 2, a monolithic design, except even bigger and more detailed. 2006 through to 2010, so this is a very recent case study, cancelled again. At least $400 million lost, so now we're up to $700 million thrown away. The FBI in this particular case needed innovation. They had a new strategy. They were trying to use new technology. This type of top secret case management hadn't been done before at this scale anywhere in the world. They wanted new business processes to link together with new departments within the government, and they had unfamiliar suppliers to work with. Okay. This is the case for using an innovation project approach where Agile, I think, is more appropriate. And in fact, in this case, it was more appropriate. What happened? Oh, well, let me just talk about the big design upfront mindset. And this is a little idea you can use, an aside. If you're talking to any of your management and they say, well, what's the problem with doing a big design? Let's look at this from the point of view of an average American when he was asked how to design a car. So there's Homer. You remember this episode of The Simpsons when somebody, for some reason in the story, decided they were going to ask Homer Simpson, what would be your perfect car? And nobody has ever asked this person before what he really wanted. And this was his one chance to get everything perfectly right. So he took it. A chance to get what I want. I better ask for all the features I possibly can. And in fact, this is what happens if you produce a big design up front and you do the right thing and you ask all of your stakeholders what do they want, you get more and more and more ideas. And it's difficult to turn any of those ideas down because they seem so logical. and you put them together into one monolithic design that can't be broken down. And one idea relies upon another idea, relies upon another idea. And you end up with something that is virtually unbuildable. And this is what Homer did. He said, I want a car with big tail fins, a big bubble dome, Rolls-Royce radiator. It's got to be very, very fast, but also very heavy and very safe. It's got to be big, but very maneuverable at the same time. And they tried to build this car, and they ended up with this. And it's a nonsense. So when they tried to build the car, of course, it was too expensive, no one could afford it, and it was a failure. Doll. I don't know how that translates into Swedish. Is it doll in Sweden? Yeah. So the waterfall analogy, again, if someone says to you, what do you mean by waterfall? Is this a method or something? It isn't really, it's just a derogatory term for this waterfall of processes which are set up. Very, very difficult to make a change. If you're doing all the designs and then you do the testing at the end and you discover a problem, then you have to go right back to the beginning again and then put that change all the way through. And that can be very, very difficult. People are very averse to doing this, and this means things are less agile. It's a bit like swimming up a waterfall, and I guess this is the change control board at the top here, and not allowing any fish back up. So you have the big design up front, that's the horse, and you've got the waterfall method, that's the carriage, and you put these together in an innovation project, and this is not going to be agile. It looks good, but you often end up with a disaster. Now you see here I'm saying half, and you may just think, well, what's that half there? I'm measuring my velocity, and this is one of the ideas in an agile project. As you go through, you actually see how fast you're talking, and I had no idea how fast or indeed how slowly I was going to talk today. So what I do is I have a look and see how much product I've delivered. I'm halfway through, and I've gone for 15 minutes, which is half of my half hour. Gosh, that's good. So my velocity is bang on. So I've done a burn down chart here, haven't I? I've gone through about 20 slides or 15 slides, going down this burn down chart. I'm heading towards 10 o'clock and I should finish on time. But if I actually ramble like I am at the moment, I'm going on a bit, aren't I? And I'm deviating from the subject. Then what I do is I cut the number of slides. And I don't carry on for another half hour or 1 hour and then throw the rest of the whole of the day into disarray. So if I cut a couple of slides at the end, that's deliberate. It's not a bad thing. And the same with your projects as well. The agile way is always hit the timescale. So J.P. Morgan, the American banker, said, I want it Thursday. Well, actually an American accent. I want it Thursday, not perfect. I want it Thursday, not perfect. Okay, so he's more interested in the timescale than perfection. He didn't even say Friday, did he? He actually said Thursday. There's even more urgency in there, in what he's saying. And that's what an agile project leans towards, delivering things on time, an aversion to slipping timescales. Well, gosh, now my velocity has decreased, so I've lost a minute. So the agile rescue, we've had two parts of this case study so far, failure, and they brought in this new guy, Chad Fulgham. He's a good-looking guy, in from Wall Street, and he's brought in a new approach, the agile approach. He's used this at his previous organization. And I think all these slides will be available on the Project Forum website afterwards. And this case study is available in more detail in a PDF online somewhere on my blog. And in a webinar as well, if you want to go into this in more detail. But basically, he broke up the project into modules. So rather than having a big design up front, he made it modular. And he put in incremental delivery from 2011 through to 2013. In fact, increment 4 is coming in later this month. So every 3 months, they're putting a new increment of this system live. And he actually has been criticized because it hasn't been perfect. So a lot of people are saying, well, the search function doesn't do everything we want. True, but it will next month, or it will 3 months after that. But you've got the system running now, and it meets their requirements, okay? They've got 20,000 FBI agents using this system now. It only cost, it does sound like a lot of money, but $99 million, and it took 2 years. The previous 2 attempts at this project cost $600 million, and took nearly 10 years and got nowhere. So what did he do? What he did was he inverted this iron triangle. And you may have seen this in your project management planning approaches. The traditional approach says that you agree all the features up front. So you agree your big design up front, and then you work out how much time it's going to take, what the cost will be, and quite often quality becomes very variable because you're trying to deliver all those features. The agile approach, and this is a diagram out of the DSDM book, so it's one of the agile methods, but I like this diagram a lot. It says, well, let's turn this upside down. Let's say we've only got a certain amount of time and money, which actually are usually the things you really are very fixed on. And let's instead vary the features. So a bit like the talk I'm giving now, I've only got a certain amount of time to go through my slides. I'm going to meet that time. The cost is fixed. So the number of slides you're going to get has to vary depending on how fast or slowly I talk and how many questions I get. We'll have 5 minutes for questions at the end, I think. So the idea is to vary the features and always deliver on time in increments. So how do we avoid this war between the traditional planners and these agile newcomers? I have a proposal for peace. Let's give peace a chance, like I said. And this proposal is, let's have agile diagnostics. So if you're a portfolio manager or a program manager, or you're in project assurance, for example, when you get a project proposal, have a look at it and say, well, is it an innovation project? So if it meets those tick boxes for innovation, which I mentioned earlier, and we'll go through it in a little bit more detail in a minute, then you say, yes, this is an agile project. We need a lot of innovation. We're not sure what we want. There's a number of ways of doing this. We're working with new suppliers. The users aren't very sure what we want. We have a lot of stakeholders. Let's do this the agile way. Let's create a prototype, put part of it into pilot running, and keep delivering an incremental, very smooth flow of work. However, on the other hand, you may say, no, this is something we're very familiar with. It's something that we do regularly. We have an existing change team that handle this type of project. This should be a traditional specification, plan, build type project. But what we're seeing nowadays, I think, is a lot more projects falling in between the two. So it's not quite as stark a choice as this. We have what I would call somewhat agile projects, which are hybrids. So you might have a new skyscraper going up, but then you've got new technology or new air conditioning units going into it, or different people on each level of the skyscraper wanting different requirements. Or tunneling for new trains or putting in a new bridge or whatever, but you might have a different toll mechanism for the cars or a different ticketing mechanism for the trains. And that part could be innovation. So you might have parts which are traditional specification and build, and parts which are agile. So how do we put those two together into a hybrid program? So when you carry out these diagnostics, you might go for traditional planning. So you've got a steamship there. He's very happy. He's going down one path. Your little yacht, very agile. That's for innovation projects. And maybe you've got hybrid projects. So you've got a motor cruiser with little sails on top. Yeah. But watch out for the rocks. Here's one rock. Here's another rock. And I'll tell you what these two rocks are. And they're halfway in between these different good places to be. These are the rocks to watch out for. An example of the one on the left here is what some people call water scrum fall. So it's waterfall, but with scrum in the middle. So you're still doing the traditional plan and speccing and building, but you're using some agile method, maybe scrum you've heard of. Use it as some sort of magic wand that can do the programming faster. You've heard from various different consultants maybe that it's more efficient, it's faster doing things on Scrum. That's not true. Actually, I'd say Agile is slightly less efficient, but it's more likely to hit the mark. And usually when people are trying to sell you a new method, the very last thing they'll fall back on is the fact that it'll make your people more productive. Very, very seldom. But it might make them produce something more useful. Yes. So an example of this would be the Universal Credit Project. Maybe you can't quite read this. I thought it's pretty impressive in krona. They've spent 9 billion krona so far. This is the UK government. This is the new social security system. Now it's 4 years into development now. And this is for the whole of the United Kingdom, for all security benefit claimants in the UK. And after 4 years, they have just 15,000 people on the system, out of 15 million. Okay, and they've spent 9 billion krona. And in half an hour UK time, so that would be 9:30 UK time, our Secretary of State is answering a Work and Pensions Committee hearing on this particular spend. Okay? That's water Scrum for. Avoid this. Scrum or Agile is not a way of programming faster. Don't do that. The other one is something some people call fragile. So it's agile but fragile. So you just let people do whatever they want. So it just becomes some hippie thing. People come in with their shorts and their sandals and, I don't have to do any planning anymore. Don't have to have any specifications. Nothing's signed off. We just have stand-up meetings. No. That's the worst of both worlds. Because you're promising something and then not delivering it. An example of this would be the BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, Digital Media Initiative. Again, in kroner, it's more interesting, 1.2 billion kroner. They did this in an agile way in that they just ignored what the users wanted and the programmers did what they thought was easier. Great. So what's the first thing you build in a digital, new digital system? I think I'll build an archive. Great. So you can store things away. Great. Can you get anything out again? Nope. Search functions? Nope. So nobody used it. But it was the easiest thing to build first. So they didn't take any user priorities into account when they were doing the work. And this meant that there was a disconnect between the technologists working in their little rooms, well, actually quite big rooms, about 150 people on the team. They spent a lot of money on this. And again, another parliamentary inquiry went into that one. So you've got these happy ships here, and this is where we want to be, the happy ships. And we can coexist. And it's horses for courses, as we say in England. So you've got some things are better in some ways and some better in others. So what you want is an agile portfolio. And this is what your agile portfolio would look like. It doesn't mean a portfolio only of agile projects. It means a portfolio that balances and rebalances and checks things. Actually, this is traditional portfolio management. But I think we need a new way of measuring innovation projects, because the standard ways don't work very well. So let's have a look at the project portfolio. First of all, have a look at the business case or the project brief that you're trying to put in, adding a new project into the project portfolio. If it's an innovation project, so we carry out our diagnostics, is this project more likely to be agile than not agile? Then we're going to prefer, in the business case, many options rather than one detailed option. I mean, how many people here have had business cases recently that only look at one option? Yes? Yes. Happens too often, doesn't it? They're the weakest business cases, even if they're 1,000 pages long. Especially if they're 1,000 pages long and they're only looking at one option. That means the people who have written it have really bought into that option. And they will pursue that option even when things get difficult, even when things get too difficult. If you have an innovation project, you want many options. Lots of fail-fast breakpoints. So you keep deciding, do I want to do it this way? Do I want to continue with this project or not? Rather than this death march on an attack, like some awful World War I battle that just goes on and on and on and you don't get anywhere. We've seen too many of those. Pilot and phase rather than big bang. And bread today rather than jam tomorrow. Okay, so you've actually got what you need now rather than promises of something wonderful just over the horizon. Did you hear this story about this guy who's taken $70 million off 700 people because he promised that he'd fly them into space? It's amazing. You know who I'm talking about. Let's have a quick look at some portfolio diagnostics. We've got about 10 minutes, so let's look at 4 projects. And these are real-life projects, but I've simplified them for this particular example. Project number 1, let's call this new sales process. So we can use these agile diagnostics. Is this something that could be or should be an innovation project? I think it probably should be if it's a new sales process in your organization. Probably using new technology, new channels, different ways of rewarding people, different ways of giving discounts. You're not quite sure how it's going to work. You're not quite sure of the business model. So you look at the spreadsheet. And these examples are really good for your CFO, your chief financial officer, because you're looking at really just a spreadsheet of numbers, and you can tell a lot. Look, you've got 3 years of putting money in, £12 million, £12 million, £12 million, 3 years of development. Wow, look at the result. In 4 years' time, you've got benefits of 20, 20, 20. You've got a net return of 64 million on that. Isn't that wonderful? This is the best project I'm going to show you, actually. I'm going to show you 4 projects. This is the one to go for, isn't it? No. Because you've probably only got one option you're working on here. For 3 years, you're going to build it. And you're not going to know if it works until year 4, are you? Have you got low work in progress? This is another question for your chief financial officer. No. At the end of year 1, the end of year 2, the end of year 3, this, if you're lucky, this is going to sit on your balance sheet. Well, in fact, that's bad, because in fact, you've now got £36 million of capitalized software development that's not been used. It's like having lots of spare parts piling up in a warehouse, and you've overvalued them. You don't know if it's going to work. And this is what's happened on the Universal Credit Project in the UK. The software development got capitalized over many years, and parts of it are now being written off. And it's many years after the work has been carried out that we now know what is and isn't working. Project number 2. This is pretty typical. You've got some legislative changes coming up. You've got a deadline of January 2016 to do the changes. In fact, you get these legislative changes every year, and what you do every year is you spend 1 quarter, 3 months doing analysing a legislation, agreeing the changes, building the changes, testing and going live. There's no real benefit apart from the fact you're not getting fined and you can stay in business. This isn't an innovation project. It's inappropriate, probably, to use an agile approach on this type of project. So it fails that diagnostic test, it becomes the steamship on the left-hand side, and you do a traditional project approach. And it goes into your portfolio, highly prioritized, using this sort of approach. Website enhancements. Website. Sounds agile, doesn't it? Let's say this is the business case that's been put forward. So they're proposing to work for 2 time periods, months, quarters, whatever it might be. Quite a bit of time there, actually. £3 million, £3 million, implementing £3 million, and then £16 million of benefit. And then the next quarter or year, then they do a bit more work, £5 million, and then some more changes and some more. Is this a constant flow of work? No, it isn't. What you're looking for in an agile project is a flow of work. So you've got increments being delivered at a regular pace. This is an irregular pace. Also, you've got a lot being implemented right up front, and then rags and tags being implemented later, rather than a nice flow of benefits coming out of the system. So it gets a very low agile score. So this is something you probably want to send back and ask them to have a think about again, just by looking at the spreadsheet. And then project 4, marketing campaigns. Tick, 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 tick. Very high agile score. You've got regular delivery, fast, upfront benefits. Maybe not a very impressive return on investment compared with that first project I showed you, but you're getting your bread today rather than the promise of that jam in 3 or 4 years' time. Part 3, program management. And just talking a little bit about hybrid programs. So here we have a traditional project. We do this waterfall of design, build, test, deploy, and we get our benefits. The benefits are the green blob at the end. You have an innovation project where you pilot something, get some benefits, pilot something, get some benefits, phase something out, get some benefits. You get those benefits in little blobs, but much earlier. The overall ROI actually is better, usually, because you get things earlier. So when you're carrying out your agile assurance on this sort of project, you need to take an appropriate approach. Okay? So if you're looking at a traditional project, you have traditional white box project assurance. So you go in and you have a look at the plans, you go in and have a look and see the processes, you go in and have a look and see how the testing is carried out. I don't know if you can quite see it, but you've got these little checks being carried out at each stage. And this has the traditional problems of assurance. It is the only way of doing it, really, but you have to have experts at each stage, often. Somebody who understands design documents, another assurance person who understands planning, another assurance person maybe who's an expert on testing. Quite a wide degree of skills are required to carry out this sort of white box assurance. If you have an innovation project, you need a different approach because, well, you're getting the benefits very early. So rather than looking at the plans and looking at the designs and the processes, why not just look at the benefits? So as you get these different phases coming out, you're using a black box assurance approach. And and you just look at the benefits that are coming out. You don't really mind too much about what's going on within the team. An agile team typically will self-organize. That means it'll change its internal processes, but you're looking at what the outputs are and how they're being used for real. So your assurance people need to have different approaches, and in a hybrid project, you need to put those together. You'll have a mixture of traditional projects and innovation projects. So maybe you're building some new buildings, which would be a traditional project, and then you're putting some new technology in. That would be an innovation project. You're training users and staff. That would be maybe a waterfall project, because you're used to doing training. You do training in tranches. You don't do training incrementally. You prepare everyone at the same time. That would be a traditional project. And then maybe you have some changes in the sales procedures within that. That might be, again, innovation using Agile. So if you're a program manager, I know we've got some program managers here today, have a think about how you're going to put together Agile and waterfall projects together in hybrid programs. And then the portfolio managers here can have a think about how do you put together hybrid programs alongside traditional projects and Agile projects within the portfolio. So the questions I was going to answer today are, what is Agile? I hope I've given you an idea of what the basic elements of Agile are and what you need to look out for something being an Agile project. We talked about portfolio management, program management, and project assurance. So we looked at how we could put together these new Agile ideas, but within a familiar framework and within the familiar bodies of knowledge that our IPMA sister organisations have, which are mainly based on traditional project management. But I don't think there's a lot needs to change for Agile to be incorporated and sit alongside very comfortably with these existing methods. So my modest proposal at the beginning was we need to stop this war between traditional planning and Agile. And what I've said to you today basically was, let's give peace a chance. Thank you very much.